It's about doing it our way.
Yeah, absolutely. Our way. I'll just do the YouTube way first.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Take a Stand event. I'm just reminding myself, I suddenly forgot. What am I doing? Who am I? What's this event?
Which day of the week is it?
What day of the week is it? Who am I? Yes, okay. The Take a Stand online conference, which is an event where I'm interviewing and speaking to 35 incredible women who are all going to share their stories of triumph over trauma. Now, these conversations can get a little bit deep, a little bit personal. So if you find unexpected emotions, feelings bubbling to the surface, please do make sure that you have someone in your network that you can reach out to and have a conversation with. If that's not the case, please go to your doctor. If they're not accessible, just pop down to your local hospital and see if you can have a conversation with somebody. There's no shame in it. A lot of us have actually done this. This is why I feel comfortable saying it, because I have done it myself in times of extreme stress. And this is a normal part of trauma recovery and healing. Unfortunately, it's one of the little side effects it likes to give us. But as I'm recording predominantly on YouTube, thank you for coming back and watching these interviews. If you are interested in living life trauma-free, please do consider subscribing, hit that little notification bell and give us a thumbs up. If you can think of anybody, as you're listening to the conversation between myself and Carol, if you can think of anybody who you think would really benefit from this conversation, please do pass the video onto them. You never know, it could be the thing that really makes the difference in their life moving forward. So it would be a good thing for them, and it's also a good thing for us to also get that information, this education further out into society. So that's my little YouTube plug. Welcome, Carol. It's been a while.
It has, my lovely. It has, yes. I think it was before COVID. Must be before.
Oh, God, easy before.
Since we spoke.
Couple years, 2.5 years.
Easily.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to reconnect.
Yes. Really good.
Yeah. So tell me your story then of triumph over trauma. I know we know one another quite well, and there's lots of ins and outs, but let's just get focused in on one particular part that you think was really helpful for people to hear.
I think the helpful part for other people would be around my marriage, which was codependent. And I'm an old lady now, and back when I was younger, we didn't know anything about all of this stuff. We didn't know psychological stuff. We didn't talk about mental health at all. And so I married a man I thought I loved, and I thought who loved me. And I had no idea that our relationship was actually not a healthy one. I thought we worked really well together. And after 31 years of marriage, he descended into alcoholism. He was a tenant farmer, and here in the UK, that creates its own issues. The majority of farmers here are actually tenant farmers, and our landlords were always pension funds or house builders, which people here will go, oh, here we go. Yes, all the agricultural land that is going to house building. And the pressure of that and the financial pressures tipped him over the edge. I think after his mother died. His mother supported him more than I realized. And it wasn't until she wasn't there that our relationship really hit the rocks. And he started a relationship with a client of mine, would you believe? And a woman I was supporting. Yeah. And she was a woman I was supporting through major trauma, which it's not my story to tell, so I'm not going to tell that. But it, we were supporting her through court and all of this sort of stuff. And as a result, they developed a relationship, which 6 months before he finally left, my daughter discovered. And I was actually away at the time. And he said to her, we are more than friends. This is to my daughter. But if you tell your mother, I will never speak to you again. And that really was, my daughter has gone through her own trauma around her father descending into alcoholism, the old, father-daughter relationship, the whole 9 yards really with that. But that secret she held on to for 2 years. And anyway, come Christmas Day, he left, and that was the end of that. I said, you can come back if you address your alcoholism, but he would never address it, and he never has. So he now lives with that woman, but the trauma of that, I lost my home. I became homeless. I went bankrupt because he went bankrupt. And I came out of a 31-year marriage with nothing, absolutely nothing, except a whole shed load of stuff, which was in our big house. And I carried with me the humiliation and the anger, massive, massive anger, but then also the self-recrimination, the why didn't I see this before? How could I not have known? Learning about codependency meant that, obviously I had a part in that relationship breakdown. I understood that. I went on to do the work, what I call the work, in order to heal. And I actually, I'll be honest, Wendy, I didn't realize I needed to do it at the time. I knew that I needed something, but it was a coach also called Wendy, interestingly, who I'd met at a conference, and she contacted me, and this was 9 years ago now. And she contacted me and she said, I'm working on something. Would you be up for being my guinea pig? And I had no idea what that was, but I intuitively knew that I had to say yes. And I had no idea, what was going to happen over the almost 2 years that I worked with her, both one-to-one and in a group of others. I used to travel all the way from, I'm up in the east of England, and I used to travel down to the West Country, down to Devon once a month for a whole day with 4 other ladies. And I had no idea the depth of the anger, the hurt, the pain, and everything else that ran underneath it. I knew that I was angry. I knew that I felt abandoned. Abandonment is one of the big things in my life, abandonment. And I knew I felt, my thinking was, this is not fair. I've been married to this man for 31 years and it all fell apart and I had no control over it. And, I have ADHD, and so control is one of the big things for me. It's like I'm either in control or totally out of control. It's like one or the other.
No middle ground. Right.
No middle ground for me, Wendy, at all.
Wow.
And so I'd gone from being anally in control to being totally out of control. And being homeless was, I guess, part of the humiliation, because people I thought were friends disappeared into the ether.
Yeah.
At a time when I needed them more than ever, really. And I ended up, I spent 6 months living with a former client of mine who'd become a friend. And then when she moved, I spent I spent a year living with my son's neighbors, who I'd not met. I think I met them once before I moved in to their house.
That was nice of them.
Well, they were going through their own trauma.
Right.
They'd lost their adult daughter in a very bad car accident the year before.
Oh, okay.
And I felt like, okay, I'm being guided to be here so that I'm not just focusing on myself, I'm actually here to support them as well. And yes, we live in a bubble, I think, our own life bubble very often. And we don't realize that actually we're not unique. We're not alone in this experience.
Yeah.
And, and this human experience is all about what we create. The big thing for me was, oh, well, you created that relationship. You created that situation. I beat myself up even more, right? Because I hadn't had the support. I hadn't done the work to learn that it's not quite as simple as that.
No,
it's so complicated.
It's far from simple. Yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah. So, when I did this work with Wendy, I eventually, I say eventually because I resisted letting go. I resisted. It was like, no, my life is shit. Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to say that, but it's like that because of X, Y, and Z. This has happened to me. This is a reality. And what I learned was that I could let go of the past and how I felt. I could actually choose to let that go. So it's not quite as flippant as it sounds. It's very much, it's acknowledging it first. It's going, okay. And what I realized from doing this work was I was totally disconnected.
Right.
From who I am. I was disconnected from myself, my inner self. I was disconnected totally from my body. And I just wasn't acknowledging anything. And what I learned was in the acknowledgement, oh, okay. Now that's interesting. That thought is interesting. And just sitting with it. And in the sitting with it, it lifted. Now, it took me 3 months to get to that point. But when I did, I took off. It was like I could feel this rucksack. It wasn't a normal rucksack. It went from my shoulders down to the floor. Of all of the stuff that I carried. Right? I mean, it was huge. And, well, I was almost 60. So it's like, You know, I lived a life that I'd had traumatic experiences as a child, which I didn't consider trauma at the time, but which I now see as a young child would have been traumatic. So I carried all this stuff all this time, and I took it off. And I felt lighter. And then what happened was my body let go of a whole load of fat it didn't need anymore. My body released 44 pounds of weight it no longer wanted to carry around.
That's incredible.
And what I've learned subsequently is that, you know, we store our unresolved trauma, emotions, chemical toxins, heavy metals, everything. We store that in fat on our body. And because our body says, okay, I've got to kind of hold on to that because I don't want it circulating around because it's going to make her ill or him ill. And it just released it like that. Now, I'd been dieting for 50 years, right? That's how disconnected I was with myself and my body. And I just thought, okay. I mean, I didn't realize I was releasing weight until my trousers fell down at work. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Have they really stretched that much? No. I got on the scales and, oh, okay, 21 pounds? Where's that gone? And I had never before linked my weight issues with trauma. And we now know, the science is out there, that the two are linked. But I didn't then. You know, and I rang Wendy and I went, what the hell's happening? And she went, oh, that's interesting. It's just like, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So, and now the universe is sending me women as clients who have experienced significant trauma in their lives, who also have a weight issue. And it's so interesting because I think we're very good at dismissing what's happened to us. I was anyway. And this is what I discover with a lot of women is that they don't talk about this stuff because they don't think it's significant or because they fear judgment from others when they're talking about it. And you know, when I worked in a doctor's surgery for a while, because after my divorce I had a breakdown and I couldn't work with clients. It wasn't safe for me to work with clients. And so I went to work in a doctor's surgery, and we were in our catchment area included at that time the women's refuge. And women used to come in, mostly young, but there was an older woman. And she said to me, she said, I've done this twice now. She said, you'd think I'd learn. And I went, oh, it's not as easy as that. It's not as easy as that. You know,
it's funny, isn't it? It's funny, even when you're confronted with something and it's all around you, but you still can't see it. You still can't hear it. You still can't see it. It's almost like there's just a complete level of denial.
Oh, yes. Oh,
to what your own
absolutely.
experience.
Yeah. I guess because we don't want to. We fear
Not ready.
that.
Yeah,
Not
not
ready.
ready.
Not ready. You know, my daughter would say, I just want my daddy back.
Mm.
And she's not going to have that. She's not going to get her daddy back. And their relationship is continuing to change the whole time because she's moving forward. She's doing her work. I'm continuing to do mine, but her daddy's not doing any of it, right? He's still where he was.
Mm.
And you know that thing where they say you have to learn to leave people behind because you grow and they don't. Yeah. But how do you leave your daddy behind? You know, it's a real challenge for her. And what I've had to learn is not just how to deal with all of my stuff, but how to support her going through her stuff. And her brother is a whole different ballgame because he's a man, right? And he didn't experience the same thing she did. She was living at home at the time, he wasn't. So, you know, his experiences are different. And men don't talk about it in the same way. He certainly doesn't. So for me, it was about, I didn't have to, but I did. I learned to accept what had been. I'm not saying I forgave him. I accepted it. I accepted my part in it, albeit subconscious. I had no idea, you know, that I was feeding it. And most of the time, I don't have any regrets. Sometimes I do. You know, sometimes I look at my friends who are in secure relationships, retiring, they have money, they have a life, while I am dealing with something completely different as a result of that. But I'm also fairly kind of okay with the fact that I couldn't work with the women that I work with now if I had not been through that.
And that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. What with the women that you work with now, what's a common theme that they present with? Can you think of something that is familiar? I was going to say familiar. Familiar is not the right word. But something that they all experience.
Yeah, I think most of them, not all necessarily, but most have talked to me about abandonment. You know, one was abandoned as a baby.
Abandonment is a big issue.
Oh,
it's funny. Not
huge.
Many people talk about it. It's huge, but not many people actually talk about it. But it's the cause for quite a lot of things. Abandonment.
It is, and you know, and it's not. I mean, some truly were abandoned by their parents, right? Others they felt abandoned because they weren't emotionally supported by their parents and caregivers.
Yeah.
I have a bit of both, in that my father was in the Navy. So my view of him when I was tiny, of him going away for 3 to 5 months, was that he'd abandoned me. He'd left me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He came back. Yeah. And then he had his own emotional issues, but and one of the things I do regret is that he died when I was 39, and I can't talk to him about this now. I mean, he'd be in his 90s, but I've not been able to talk to him about my journey and to be able to have the discussions which I know he would have wanted to have. But then, my mother was not emotionally supportive to me at all. And so I never learnt really what I never learnt to express my emotions. If I look at young children now, and they're ticked off for being angry and stuff, well, that's when we first think, okay, how can I feel better? Oh, sweeties, or chocolate, or my food was always butter. I'd go and get a bit of bread and toast it, and I'd spread butter really thickly right to the very edge, because that felt comforting to me, because I didn't know what to do with my emotions. I couldn't express them. And, if I could change one thing, it would be, to teach everybody that it's okay to express their emotions. But it's how we do it that's the key. And, I used to blame other people for how I felt. And now I take full responsibility for how I feel. And
Is that the bit of advice? Is that the bit of advice you'd give to your younger self? So knowing everything that you know now.
I guess so. Yes. Because I never could express how I felt, and it's still not easy for me. Except that, I do, I tell my kids every day that I love them. I tell my granddaughter every time I see her that I love her. I tell my friends that I love them. I have learnt to express myself and have conversations where anger doesn't come up. The general pissed offness that I used to feel at life and everybody in it isn't there anymore.
That's great. That's great. What a
and
relief.
and I no longer use food. I no longer use food as a comfort, unless I need a hug, in which case then I make a mug of hot chocolate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, my clients all come to me about their weight, but because it's never about their weight.
Yes,
right?
what's underneath it.
Yeah. The problem that you think is the problem is never the problem.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And if talking about it and, holding conferences like this helps people to see that they are not on their own, then that is helpful. And,
Yeah.
you know, my advice is always seek help. Seek help.
Yeah. You absolutely don't need to be dealing with things by yourself, for
No.
sure. You may feel that that is the best thing to do, but it isn't necessarily in your best interest to do so, I would say.
No.
I think if you're feeling unsure, frightened, you feel resistance to getting help, then that's a sure sign that actually you need to go and get the help.
Yeah.
It's an indication that it's time now to step through that and reach out and get the support and the help you need.
Absolutely. And just be open, you know, open to whatever that help is. Because I think if you approach stuff with an open heart and actually engage in it and realize that it takes as long as it takes, there is no quick fix to this stuff.
No.
You know, and as you and I both know, there are layers. There's layers and layers, and you know, every time you work on something, other stuff comes up.
Yeah.
And it isn't about being perfect, because none of us are.
No. And there's nothing perfect about these conversations.
No.
Far from it. It doesn't fit in a box. It's not. It's raw. They're hard conversations. But you know, it's a necessity. It's paramount. You know, it's and I always think it's a bit addictive. Actually, once you get into it, and you start waking up and you realize what the possibilities and opportunities are, it's amazing. You just want to keep going.
You do.
So the first bit is challenging and is hard. Actually, after a while, you're like, bring it on. Give me
bring
more.
it on. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, as I said to you, you know, I spent the summer doing work on my money story. Because that is linked to everything else, and money in itself is traumatic.
Trauma, yeah.
You know, so but once you yourself start doing this work, I don't know about you, Wendy, but I see so much around me of people, and I want to go, oh, would you like to talk about that? And I think, oh no, maybe
I see
they
it
don't.
in business. I see it in business women all the time, and I have to stop myself, because I sort of think, I have to stop myself, because you know what that saying is, you can't take a, hang on a minute, I don't know the saying now. It's about taking a horse to water. I can't remember.
Yes.
Can you remember?
You take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah, so I have to stop myself.
Yeah,
because I'm just wasting a lot of the time I can just be wasting my own energy.
Exactly. And you know, as I've got older, I have to be more aware of that, particularly with social media. You know, it's just not diving into those conversations, picking my battles now.
Absolutely.
And you know, I mean, if I tell you that after I'd done the initial 3 months work with this other Wendy, my children said to me, my daughter, she said, Mum, are you okay? Yeah, I am fine. I'm actually really good. I said, this is the real me. And she went, okay, you're sick. No, I'm not sick, darling. And she went, okay, you're just weird then. Well, of course, now she's started on her own journey.
Yeah.
She sees it differently. She's grown up a bit in that time.
Right.
And but you know, it just shows we don't see ourselves as others see us.
Nope, that's for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's taught me to stay in my own lane a bit more. I think I realized
that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I think, I used to
Exactly.
consider myself, a helper, a rescuer. And if anybody
Yeah.
out there knows about the drama triangle, a rescuer isn't very good. But I used to think, oh yes, I want to help everybody and blah, blah, blah. But that was just a deflection against all my own stuff. And, all
Well,
that
it's an unmet
created.
need, isn't it? Yeah, it's just
Yes,
trying to meet an unmet
absolutely.
need from a child.
Yes. And when I say to people, what are your needs? Oh, particularly with my clients, I go, what are your needs? And they go, I have no idea. Because they're thinking about their children, their partner, their parents, their friends, their own clients if they're in business. They, particularly women, I think we're brought up not to think about ourselves and not to put ourselves first.
Yeah.
And it's a hard mantle to throw off.
I think that's a good note to finish on. Is that taking a stand isn't necessarily about taking a stand against other people. It's about taking a stand for yourself, putting yourself first, doing the inner work it is that you need to do, because then you're much more equipped to be able to deal with the outside world. But a lot of the time when you're experiencing trauma is that you look at everything externally, whereas actually everything, reality is internally. It's how you're perceiving the world. And once you can get a shift on your perspective and see things for what they truly are, then the magic really starts to happen.
Absolutely, it does. Oh yes. It's very much. I mean, if I say to you that 9 years ago when I was doing that work, I started feeling love in my body for the first time ever in my entire life. I knew intellectually that I loved my children. Didn't feel it in my body because I was so disconnected from it. So it is very much doing. The answers are all in here, but we are so programmed to look outside of ourselves for them.
Yeah.
So do the work.
Do the work. Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. If you would like to reach out to Carol, her details are below the YouTube video. So please do make sure you reach out, connect, have a conversation if you need to. Thanks once again, lovely.
Thank you.